welcome to the Forbes India Cover Story podcast series in association with theindicast.com. This issue's cover story celebrates companies, research organizations, and outfits that are working tirelessly to develop a coronavirus vaccine as the clock keeps ticking on the deadly scourge. Joining me on the call to talk about her cover is Divya J. Shekhar. Hi Divya, nice to have you on the call.
Hi Abhishek, good to speak with you.
Thanks. Let's start with a little bit of a background as to what does it to develop a vaccine for any disease? What are some of the timelines? What goes behind developing a vaccine? How difficult or easy is it?
Scientists have developed a vaccine so far has been 5 years because vaccines, there are various stages of developing a vaccine. First, they have to pick the disease to target, then they have to develop a vaccine candidate. Then it has to be first tested on animals. Then there are safety and efficacy trials that are done on humans. And then there are a set of regulatory procedures that one has to follow before the vaccine is ready to be administered on people as a treatment against the virus. Conventionally, the earliest that they have developed is 5 years. But given that the rate of coronavirus infections are increasing by the day, scientists have targeted between 18 to 24 months. That kind of timeline is historically short to develop a vaccine.
And you write that there are at least 115 such initiatives across the world in search for one. Is that correct?
True. So according to the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, in April 2020, there were 115 ongoing initiatives. There are companies which are joining in world over with trying to develop a vaccine candidate on different platforms. So that number might have increased. But as of writing the story, there were at least 115 ongoing global vaccine initiatives. In India, there are at least 7 companies and research institutions who are working on developing a vaccine candidate using different technological platforms and approaches.
When it comes to developing a vaccine, let alone in the time frame that researchers have targeted, what would it take for a country like India to chart that path? What are some of the challenges?
Initially, the lockdown posed immediate challenges in the development process, because there were the obvious disruptions in the supply chain and movement of people and scientists. Then there are funding requirements because developing a vaccine literally costs billions of dollars. Experts believe that being price conscious will be important for India to make the vaccine more accessible to people, but the cost of such a vaccine is likely to be influenced by a number of factors. And even though India has been at the forefront of vaccine export, as in we have the infrastructure to actually manufacture a vaccine, but in terms of R&D and in terms of developing a vaccine from scratch, that's still an area that's comparatively nascent for us here. That would also probably add to the time that we take to, develop and test out a vaccine and, trial it.
While you were researching for the story, could you give us a couple of examples of companies or research outfits which have taken this challenge up and how are they going about it?
So one of the largest initiatives in the country is the Serum Institute of India, which has taken up manufacturing of the vaccine that is being developed by the Oxford University in the UK. Then there is Ahmedabad-based Zydus Cadila, which is developing a DNA-based vaccine. It uses the DNA and RNA of the coronavirus for a coronavirus protein, which prompts an immune response in the body. Basically, the nucleic acid is inserted into human cells, which provides us protection. So essentially, this is a vaccine that is created using the DNA and RNA of the coronavirus itself. Then there are a lot of companies who are using a protein-based approach to develop a coronavirus vaccine. So basically, coronavirus proteins are injected directly into the body, and fragments of proteins or protein shells that mimic the coronavirus's outer coat can also be used here. So basically, companies like Bangalore-based Minvax or Indian Biological E, they are also using the protein-based approach.
Is there a consensus among the scientific community that having multiple approaches is indeed a good idea? or is there any one approach that is more promising than the other?
So, as of now, since we are running out of time, it is recommended that various approaches be carried on simultaneously, even though the chance of an approach succeeding is very low. People, companies, and institutions are ready to put in billions because the need to develop a vaccine is an urgent one. So, at the same time, usually, unless the efficacy of a certain vaccine candidate is determined, people don't put that much money into it. Investors don't put that much money into it. So, be it repurposing old drugs, so, or developing vaccines from scratch, or using plasma therapy, everything has to go on simultaneously because scientists are working with a new virus. I mean, so for which there are no standards set in stone yet. So whatever solutions they can come up with through whichever platform, whoever gets to, successful human and efficacy trials first, that would be something that, they would try and scale up.
Right. And you mentioned funding, and you write that around 15 crore rupees is what is required for just getting to the first phase of clinical trials.
So the 15 crore that has been mentioned are the figures that are given by one of the companies that is quoted in the story. The amount of money that is required to develop a vaccine candidate differs depending upon the platform that is being used, depending upon the scale at which they want to produce it, and depending on how to what extent each company wants to take it. So if they are only manufacturing a vaccine candidate, that is being developed by someone else, like the Serum Institute, the costs involved would be different. At this point, given the urgency of developing a vaccine and, coming out with a cure, I mean, given that it has infected crores of people and killed lakhs around the world while crippling the global economy, traditional processes are being sidelined. Which is why, be it governments, non-profits or pharma companies, they are investing billions into platforms, even with low odds of success.
Right. And at the same time, it's really saddening to read about countries like Brazil. I think you would have seen that yesterday, which has more than 290,000 coronavirus cases. The health minister there issued guidelines to prescribe anti-malarial drugs in the fight against COVID-19, which has absolutely no evidence that it can help cure, mild symptoms. And it only exacerbates the situation given that the supply side, imagine you write that some 7 billion doses of the vaccine will be needed to be manufactured and distributed across the world. So the challenge is not just creating a vaccine, but also distributing it.
True. In a country like India, it's also important to make that vaccine accessible to a whole lot of people. One cannot produce a vaccine that costs, say, $100 and it cannot be accessed by everybody. So, and some of the experts also said that while India is known to manufacture vaccines for international organizations and agencies, a lot of indigenous research has started from scratch. And also one cannot easily determine if it is if it is developed for some other country or if a vaccine is developed in some other country. They would obviously be the primary beneficiaries of such a vaccine. So if it is developed in the UK would be the first to use the vaccine. So by the time it comes to India, it might take longer.
In some countries, an idea is being proposed about how to incentivize to those who could crack this or come close to cracking it. Do you see any of that helping or happening in India?
In India, the government has already backed a few companies, and the Department of Biotechnology has already given funding to the Serum Institute of India, Zydus Cadila and Bharat Biotech. And given the urgency to develop this vaccine, I think, companies are also getting into collaborations with international players, and there is a lot of investment that is coming their way, and depending upon how efficacious their vaccine is. And I think the government has also declared that they would make the regulatory processes much easier. compared to what it is, and also much quicker, given that the timelines are, quite challenging to meet. So that one would know only after animal trials are done and, you actually go to do your efficacy tests.
Right. We hope there is some hope at the end of it all, or we hope we crack this problem. Anyone across the world,
At the
because it's much
earliest.
needed
Yeah.
at the earliest. Divya, thank you
Yeah.
very much for your time on this podcast. Thanks a lot.
Sure. Thank you, Abhishek.
Thank you. All your listeners, you can find this podcast on ForbesIndia.com, iTunes, and now on Spotify and Stitcher too. To have someone call you for a Forbes India subscription, message Forbes to 51818.